Do you want to build a butsaman?
A what?
Hello fellow eccentrics, and welcome to the inaugural video of Ebener's Eccentricities. I'm Teresa.
I'm Rich.
And we'll do a proper introduction, what is this channel about video at a later date, but right now the video we have planned is time sensitive, so we're going to go right into the construction of our butsaman.
Alright, what is a butzemann?
Okay. In the PA Dutch heathen tradition of Urglaawe, which took the tradition from regular PA Dutch sources, a butzeman is an activated scarecrow that you make with plants from your land or even from pots in your apartment window to protect your property and your plants and help them thrive.
Okay.
Some people make full 6-foot scarecrows with stick skeletons. I make a tiny poppet because our fire pit is small. We'll get to that in a moment. And others sometimes just buy little craft dolls from stores like Joann's, cut them open, take a bit of the stuffing out, and replace that with some plants and either sew or fabric glue that up. So it's really something you can do no matter what your skill level is.
Well, that's a bonus.
It is. There are a couple of rules about what you can put in your butzeman. Your butzeman is burnt at the end of the harvest, and since he's burnt, you cannot use any elder to construct him. There is a verbod, a taboo, against burning elder because it is sacred to Holla. Other people will say don't put any poison plants in them, most specifically Jimson weed, which is a datura, and others also specify nightshades, but there's some wiggle room on that because a lot of common garden crops like tomatoes and potatoes are technically nightshades. So it's more up to the individual regarding that.
Sounds like it.
Yeah. One of the other rules of your butzeman is you set him up and you give him offerings to help feed him and give him strength throughout the year. Anything you give him should be burnt with him as a sign of hospitality. That includes his clothes, whether you make them or buy them, and anything you give him. So if there's like a dish you want to use for his offerings that you don't intend to burn, just let him know that he's borrowing that. You burn him before the last night of the holiday known as Allerliefdaagsfeest, which starts at sunset on October 30th. So it coincides quite well with the Halloween Samhain season.
So that would even be a good marker for someone that isn't specifically following Urglaawe tradition.
Right. And what's interesting is that if you don't burn him by the last night, which is by sunset on November 11th, he may in fact become a boogeyman.
Well, now that is a word that sounds familiar.
It should. It's where we get the word boogeyman. What happens is his shell is taken over by
Something nasty.
something nasty. In Irish traditions, there are traditions about like not eating blackberries after Samhain because they've been poisoned by the puka, which is very similar to the type of spirit that inhabits the butzeman after, if it's not burnt at that time. There's a cat that you probably can't see.
Probably not.
I will be reading a story during construction that will give you some details on the type of things that can happen if your butsaman is not destroyed. So with that being said, we're going to go and segue into the making portion.
With one small disclaimer, this is brand new, all of it to both of us. The shooting, the editing, the audio. So please be kind.
The only limit to the size of your butsaman is the size of your fire receptacle. Please burn him responsibly. My fire pit is small, as is my garden, so my butsaman will be fairly small, about the size of a gingerbread man or so. If your butsaman is small like mine, it's also a great cabbage busting project. On a piece of cotton, I trace out my vague gingerbread doll shape and then sketch in some facial features before handing it off to Rich to embroider. This is a new skill. Last year's butsaman had a bare echo of a face that wore off quite quickly. They don't need to have a face if you like the Amish doll look.
Ah, the infinite nature of the circle. The embroidery... Ooh, kitty. Now, not only is Lucifer one of the neediest cats I've ever known, but he's one of very few where the belly rub is never a trap. With that distraction out of the way, we can now get to some actual embroidery. Here we have Teresa's drawing in the hoop. And we're going to start with just a simple split stitch. I think some people call it a chain stitch. After you've made your knot so that you can come up through the bottom and not have your thread pull through, you go back down, creating one simple length of stitch there. And then you've got to come back up and split that thread. This still gives me enough of a problem most of the time that I've got to pull the embroidery right up to my face to see what I'm doing. And you just keep repeating that. Here we have the completed mouth and nose. For the eyes, my plan was to start with a French knot, which makes a little roundish bit, and then do the chain stitch around the eye. French knot is a little more complicated of a technique. You gotta wrap your thread around the needle, assuming you don't tangle it up in itself. And then you go back down almost where you came up. And if you do it well, it should create this little knot. Now, I'm sure I'll get better over time, but right now, I wish I had 3 hands to do a French knot, because I want to keep pressure on the knot, pull, and maintain tension on the thread that hasn't been pulled through. But I get there eventually, and we have a little dot. And there's the chain stitch around the rest of the eye. Gave him a little bit of side eye accidentally, but we'll live. Now here I noticed that a French knot plus eyebrow actually creates a better eye, but I wasn't going to undo the whole first eye. So there's the second eye completed. Really maintaining the side eye. That was not intentional. And then on to the hair. Just more chain stitching to create some simple lines. We're not going for artistic mastery here. I believe that's Fenrir looking to come and check out what I'm doing quite aggressively. But there you have it.
Then I pin and sew the right sides together. Yes, I know, sewing with double thread isn't best practice, but it's how I learned, and this guy needs to survive several months of outdoor living. Now, as you watch me sew, admittedly not very well, how about I tell you the legend of Delbel der Butzemann from the first book of Urglaawe myths by Robert Schreiwer. The legend of Delbel der Butzemann. Harmeyer was a pleasant man and a diligent farmer. Unfortunately, he had experienced a farm injury as a young man, and now as an old man he walked with a pronounced limp on his right leg. With each passing year, Harmeyer encountered more and more trouble keeping up with his crops and felt less and less confident in his ability to care for them. One year, as the snows of winter roared, Harmeyer finally decided he needed help with the protection of his crops. His bones were aching, and his old injury was throbbing from the icy humidity. In order to seek some relief from his pains, Harmeyer visited his village Blackadder, who was renowned for her herbal wisdom, healing touch, and keen insights. The Blackadder greeted Harmeyer as usual, and throughout the course of their conversation, Harmeyer asked for the Blackadder's advice regarding his plight with his crops. The Blackadder immediately replied that Harmeyer should construct a Butzemann, a scarecrow, from crop remnants in the field, and bring him to her for activation on Groundhog Day. Harmeyer did not understand what activation was, but upon leaving the Blackadder's cottage, he did as she had instructed and built his scarecrow. Thinking that he and the scarecrow together made a whole unit, he constructed the scarecrow with weaker materials in his left leg. His left limb will match mine, thought Harmeyer. On February 2nd, he returned to the Blackadder, bringing his scarecrow with him. The Blackadder took the Butzemann and whispered some incantations over his head. When the Blackadder asked Harmeyer what he'd like to name the scarecrow, he thought of the limp and answered, Delbel. She continued her incantations, this time also drawing symbols over the scarecrow's head. She then took a deep breath and exhaled over the mouth of the scarecrow. "Du ist dat Butzemann Delbel Danai," she announced, holding the newly activated scarecrow up to a bewildered Harmeyer. She then provided Harmeyer with additional instructions for his scarecrow, seeing that if he followed them carefully, this Butzemann would patrol his land and help to protect his crops. "Most important, though," said she, "is that you set him afire no later than Alalivasil, when Hola calls for him. Otherwise, trouble will beset everyone and everything around you." Harmeyer shrugged and returned home. Harmeyer observed the Blackadder's instructions faithfully throughout the spring. He shall Delbel his turf, provide him with clothes and a perch, and he lavished offerings of molasses and milk upon the Butzemann. In turn, Delbel grew stronger. The plant spirit within him grew bolder. At night, Delbel would emerge as a spirit from the scarecrow shell. Despite his limp, he learned to fight the frost giants and to keep troublesome land spirits at bay. By midsummer, Harmeyer's land was bursting with bounty. Delbel was very happy with his perch by day and in the fields by night. Harmeyer continued to reap the richness of the land and to share his wealth with Delbel throughout the harvest. One day, Delbel noticed that Harmeyer was not out working in the fields. He continued his own work in the fields, scaring away birds and dangerous spirits alike. 2 more days passed, and Harmeyer had not returned to the fields. Delbel became concerned when he noticed a large group of people, dressed mostly in black, carrying a large wooden box down the lane from the house. As the group came closer, Delbel could see his master stretched out inside the box. Although Delbel was not highly experienced with the world of humans, he knew that what he was seeing was not pleasant. Delbel resumed his work, Week after week passed, and the crops became overgrown and began to wither. When the day temperatures turned cooler and the frost giants began to attack at night, Delbel watched the leaves on the trees change color. When he noticed that the crops were beginning to fade, Delbel also began to feel an unexplained pull towards the ground. This sensation grew stronger with each passing day, and the source of this pull felt closer and closer to the surface of the ground beneath him. He felt more and more drawn to it. He wanted to be with it, even though he was unsure what it was. One day, Delbel noticed a little odd man loafing around the edge of his turf. His back appeared to be buckled and crooked, and Delbel felt very uneasy about his presence. At night, the little man suddenly shifted in his shape. He maintained his crooked back, but Delbel now sensed that this was a dangerous spirit. Each day, Butzemann, which is a sort of puck or puka, as Delbel called him, would approach the edge of Delbel's turf, but he would not cross the line. He did not seem interested in the crops, though. Instead, he seemed most interested in observing Delbel's actions. And each day, the pull became stronger, until the source was almost within Delbel's reach. He felt a dazzling energy coming up from the land below him. Delbel now realized that it was time for him to leave his turf. Delbel yearned to be with the source of this energy, but he was disturbed by Butzeman's persistent interest. Very hard time saying Butzemann. Finally, one crisp autumn night, Delbel felt the energy rise from beneath him. A beautiful white lady emerged from the ground, enveloping him, and pulling his spirit upward from the shell of the scarecrow. She arose above him, filling all of the night sky with an ethereal light and warmth. Delbel felt himself beginning to depart his body, and he was elated by the glory of all he was witnessing. At that moment, however, Delbel felt a tremor in his physical shell. "Butzemann," he exclaimed, "he is taking my body." Delbel fought to keep the strange spirit from overtaking his shell. The scarecrow fell to the ground, breaking the plant stems that made up Delbel's weak left leg. The impact of the fall pushed Delbel's spirit from the shell. Delbel was saddened to have lost his body to Butzemann, but he was now free to join the White Lady Hala on her journey through the skies. As Delbel joined the parade of souls behind the goddess, his joy was suddenly interrupted by the realization that part of his soul was missing. Although he was loath to leave the parade, he decided to search for that part of him that was missing. Upon returning to his turf, he observed his limping shell, which Butzemann had stolen, creating all sorts of mayhem. The fields were aflame, the neighboring cattle had been set loose, and the neighborhood children were quaking with fear. Delbel panicked. He had lost his turf, and the whole community was in chaos. He sought help from the neighbors, but without his shell, no one noticed he was there. Delbel began to move about the land, following in reverse the path that Harmeyer had walked when he brought Delbel home from the Blackadder. Delbel eventually came to the cottage in which he was born. He peered through a window, and he saw the Blackadder sitting and meditating at her altar. Delbel walked through the walls, and immediately the Blackadder stirred. "Delbel Danai," she whispered, "what brings you here?" Delbel had never spoken a word aloud before, so he was not sure that the Blackadder would hear him. "I am in need of help." The Blackadder replied, "I hear you. Tell me what is amiss." Delbel narrated the story to the Blackadder, who quickly arose from her seat. She uttered some incantations and drew some symbols over Delbel's soul. She then grabbed a bag, emptied its contents, which were some branches, into a large pot and set them ablaze. She returned to her seat and continued her incantations in a whispered voice, and all Delbel could make out were the names of Hasselheck and Hollerbeyer. The Blackadder stood up. "The leg of your soul calls out to the smoke in the bowl," she said. "Let us take the pot and follow the smoke of the burning branches." The Blackadder and Delbel hastily trailed the smoke into the dark night. The smoke led them to a neighboring farm's chicken coop, where Delbel saw his limping shell breaking the eggs beneath sitting hens. When Butzemann saw Delbel, he attempted to run, but his left leg gave out under him. The Blackadder grabbed the shell, drew symbols upon its head, and uttered some incantations. She then pushed the shell into the pot with the burning branches, setting it on fire. Butzemann jumped out along with the left leg of Delbel's spirit. Although the two parts were not connected, Delbel was still able to use his left leg to kick Butzemann to the ground, and the Blackadder banished the troublesome spirit from the physical realm. Delbel absorbed his leg back into his soul. He was pleased to be intact, but he was saddened that he was no longer in the parade of souls. "Fret not," said the Blackadder. "The burning branches can lead you to your destination too. She blew the smoke from the pot onto Delbel, and Delbel felt the energy once again around him. He fell into what seemed like a deep sleep, and when he awakened, he was in a blooming meadow that surrounded a large mill. Delbel's last words were a request to the goddess for blessings to be bestowed on the Brauchrin, who helped him to save the community. The Brauchrin returned to her cottage and went to sleep. She awoke the next morning to the sound of knocking on her door. She opened the door and was handed a message that informed her that she was the heir of the late Harmeyer's farm. Each year since then, the Brauchrin has remained in her cottage, but tended to Harmeyer's land. For the remainder of her life, she continued the tradition of building a butsaman of Delbel's lineage each year. After I've sewn around, I leave a portion of the head open and turn the figure right side out to stuff him. I noticed that his one arm was gathering weird. I'm going to blame my cat assistants. I unpicked that seam a bit and then made a patch out of scrap from cutting him off. I will admit his arms are wonky and I need to work on that for next year. Now, here are a variety of things I will use as stuffing. Some of that is fabric remnants I learned to call cabbage thanks to history bounding community and costumers. The pile of wood is fringe cut off from a wrap skirt I turned into a regular skirt last year, so it in a way is also cropped from last year's work. We also have some horehound, chocolate mint, mugwort, sage, and plantain, shown in whatever order I managed to grab them while trying to prevent the cats from eating them. Sorry, folks. I don't know how others like to place their plants, but I like to make sure there's at least some about heart level and brain level. So I sort of sew organ pouches filled with my selected plants. It's more organized and less messy that way. Once he's stuffed, I sew the top, and then we're on to making him clothes. We wouldn't want a nudist butsaman, would we? To do this, I trace the torso of my butsaman on some fabric, dividing pants from shirt and using this as a pattern to make the back side as well. I started with the shirt and pinning right sides together, cut the front and shirt up the middle so it will look like a buttoned up shirt or jacket rather than a pullover shirt. This is a me thing, totally not necessary. At least I'm not insisting on making undergarments and boots. Maybe next year. I then see if the shirt will slip on easily, and as it does not, I unpin it and pin it wrong sides together around the butsaman's torso and sew it while he's wearing it. The clothes were too tight and I had to redo those entirely. Patterns next year. Patterns. I was running out of time and focus and just wanted to get him done at this point, so I definitely skipped steps here to make the clothes as best they could be. And then the hat! Last year I made the mistake of thinking it cruel to sew the hat to my butsaman's head, and then spent the entire time running around my yard trying to find his hat. This year I am being more pragmatic and making sure his hat is secured, so it does not get lost. So I tacked down that to his head as well. And voila! We have our butsaman! He is a little wonky this year, I'm not going to lie. I need to work on my skills. He smells good though. He smells like chocolate mint, which is very nice.
Always.
Okay, so now that we've constructed your butsaman, it's time to go through the naming conventions and then activate him.
Whisper.
Excuse me, cat emergency. Okay, so last year's butsaman was Zygmunt der Nye. So this year, let's say we name him Bob.
Bob.
It'd be Bob Zygmunt Zygmundsson, because it always has the parent's name as the middle name, and then son from the original butsaman. So next year's would be, let's say, Mike Bob Zygmundsson. Now, interestingly, after the first harvest in like July, the son part of the last name is removed. So then it would be Bob Sigmund Sigmund.
Sounds complicated.
I don't make the rules.
Fair.
The activation is called the Konsega, the ceremony of the corn. That requires trance work, some rune work, and breathing life force into the butsaman. If you want me to record my first attempt at this, let me know. I'll go into the details of it in that video. And if you want to know more things like what would I have done if I had lost Zygmunt's hat, or what if my entire butsaman goes missing, or I don't have any plants in my apartment, can I still build a butsaman? Let me know and we'll include that information in the follow-up video.
And that'll be all from Evan Rose Eccentricities on this video. I'm Rich.
I'm Teresa.
And we'll see you next time.